Okay, so you sent us a whole bunch of articles about science fiction tech that's actually become real.
Hmm.
You must be fascinated by how, like, imagination can actually lead to inventions.
Well, yeah, I mean, what gets me is how sci-fi didn't just predict things. It actually inspired people. It's kind of like a loop. Authors imagine these crazy concepts, and then inventors are all fired up and actually make them happen.
It really makes you think. Like, electric cars, totally normal now, right? But get this, the idea is over 100 years old. That Tom Swift book from 1910, it had an electric car going hundreds of miles on one charge. Why did it take us so long to get with the program?
It's all about context. Back then, the internal combustion engine, that was a new hotness. The tech to mass produce electric cars, the batteries just weren't there yet.
So we needed time for the tech to catch up, but also, like, for people to even wrap their heads around it. Okay, ready for another one? Video calls. Star Trek had that on-screen thing, the 2001, a space odyssey with the video phones. And this was when rotary phones were still a thing, right?
And yet, that desire to actually see who you're talking to, it clearly struck a chord. And then bam, pandemic hits. Everyone's suddenly on Zoom. Video calls are just life. Like sci-fi gave us the sneak peek, then suddenly we needed it.
We basically time traveled through tech evolution in, what, 2 years?
And speaking of fast forwarding, AI that can create stuff. ChatGPT writing poems, composing music, even making art. Kind of freaky, no?
It blurs the lines, that's for sure. These tools we have now, ChatGPT is just one, but there's Delirly for images, AIVA for music they use, like generative adversarial networks, deep learning, to be genuinely creative.
Yeah.
And then what does creative even mean anymore?
Right. Is it really creativity or is AI just really good at copying patterns from data? And don't even get me started on the ethics of it all. Who owns the copyright for something an AI made? It's a whole new ballgame.
And it's changing so fast. By the time we even begin to get a handle on one model, there's a new one, even more powerful. All right, hold on to your hats because we're going from the virtual back to the real world, but with a sci-fi twist. Remember Total Recall, that self-driving taxi, the 1991, seemed impossible then.
And yet, look at us now. Waymo, Tesla, self-driving cars are out there. It's a huge technical challenge, though. Teaching a car to react to, like anything, making split-second choices. But the payoff could be huge, too. Less accidents, smoother traffic, more efficient transportation.
But then you've got the ethical questions, right? How do you program a car to make the so-called right call in a life or death scenario?
Right.
And what happens to all the people who drive for a living? It's like sci-fi is forcing us to deal with these really tough questions.
It just shows you how tech changes everything. It's not just the invention itself, it's how it changes our world, our jobs, even how we see ourselves.
And speaking of changing reality, let's talk virtual worlds. We've got immersive games, Second Life, World of Warcraft. Then there's that whole mind-bending Matrix thing, simulated reality. This idea of escaping into a digital world, it's classic sci-fi.
And it's not just escaping anymore, is it? It's about how those digital spaces are merging with our real lives. The metaverse, virtual concerts, online communities. We're spending more and more time in these virtual worlds.
Which makes you wonder, are we losing something real, actual human connection for the convenience and the control of the digital world? Sci-fi has been warning us about this for ages.
It's a tough one, yeah. And it's not like it's automatically good or bad, right? Think about what these virtual spaces can do, connecting with people on the other side of the world, experiencing things that are impossible in real life. It's about being aware, I think, of how this tech changes how we see reality, how we relate to each other.
Absolutely. Sci-fi is like holding up this mirror, showing us the amazing stuff and the potential downsides of what we create, which kind of reminds me of another sci-fi classic that's becoming more relevant. Food pills. Been a theme forever. From old books to, what was it, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory?
That whole thing about efficiency, right? Convenience. Maybe even a little bit of like controlling nature. A pill that's a whole meal might be a while off, but synthetic food, that's closer than we think.
Lab-grown meat, for example. Could totally change how we produce food, deal with the ethical stuff around animals, even help the environment. But would it taste the same? Would we want it to? There's something about food, the experience of it, that a pill just can't copy.
Sustenance versus experience. It makes you think about what matters, what traditions we're cool with, giving up for progress or efficiency, which is something sci-fi often wrestles with.
And speaking of big questions and consequences, nuclear-powered vehicles. H.G. Wells was onto something back in 1914 with those atomic cars.
Maybe no nuclear cars yet, but we've been using that power for ages. Submarines, aircraft carriers, the energy is huge. But so is the risk accidents, nuclear waste. Some tech is just inherently risky.
That classic dilemma, do the benefits outweigh the risks? And who even gets to decide? This isn't hypothetical anymore. This is real stuff we got to figure out.
And it goes beyond just the science. It's about the ethics, the politics, how it affects society. Sci-fi makes us think about these things, even if it doesn't always have easy answers.
Okay, let's get a bit more optimistic, yeah. Living in space. The space station proved we can live up there long term, even if we're not at Star Trek levels yet.
It shows how ingenious humans are, our need to explore, and the challenges. Zero gravity, making ecosystems that support themselves, pushing the limits of what humans and tech can handle. It's like sci-fi is giving us a preview of a future where humanity is living on other planets.
Mind-blowing, right? But let's come back to Earth for a sec, to something we use every single day. Smartphones. Basically, they're those hand terminals you see on the Expanse, just, fewer space battles.
It's amazing how much tech fits in your hand now. Communication, information, entertainment. It's like we shrunk a Star Trek tricorder down to pocket size.
And like those futuristic gadgets, smartphones have changed everything. But there's the other side, right? Social media taking over, too much information, always needing to be connected. Double-edged sword, for sure.
For sure. Tech on its own is neutral. It's how we use it, how we let it change us and our world that matters.
So true. And it makes me think about something sci-fi has been saying forever, how tech can be used to control us, manipulate us. That book, Imperial Earth, back in '75, it had personalized ads, really similar to what we see online now.
Data, 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 algorithms watching everything we do online, building these crazy detailed profiles. Then those get used to target us with ads, content, even the news we see. It can feel creepy, like they're reading our minds.
Totally. And it creates this echo chamber, right? We only see stuff that already fits with what we believe, which just divides people more. Sci-fi has been warning us about this for ages.
We gotta think critically, find different points of view, be aware of the stuff trying to change our minds without us realizing it.
Okay, ready to get a little dystopian again. Mass surveillance. That book, 1984, with the government watching everyone all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe we're not there yet.
Not as crazy as it seemed once, though, is it? Cities are covered in cameras now. Facial recognition is getting scarily good. Privacy is getting harder to define.
Like we're constantly being watched, analyzed, put in a box. And it's not just governments anymore. Companies are collecting tons of data on our habits, what we like, even our emotions. Makes you wonder, who's really calling the shots?
It comes down to power, right? Who has our information and what are they doing with it?
All right, enough doom and gloom for now.
Yeah.
Let's end on a lighter note, yeah. What about those flying cars we were promised? The Jetsons made it look so easy.
They made it look like a piece of cake, right? And, okay, we're not quite there yet, but the tech's getting closer all the time. You've got those electric vertical takeoff things, EV tools. They're already being developed.
Can you imagine? No more traffic jams, just like soaring through the air. It's kind of the ultimate commute, right?
It's a pretty amazing thought. But, just like everything else we've been talking about, there's always a catch. Think about it. Air traffic control with everyone and their grandma having a flying car, safety rules, and the environment. What about that?
Yeah, even the Jetsons had designated airlanes, right? So every time we make a big tech jump, we got to invent a whole new set of rules just to keep up. But isn't that part of what makes this so interesting? It's not just about the cool stuff. It's about how we have to change how we think about the world to make room for it.
That's the heart of it. And it brings us back to you. You sent in all these articles, so this stuff's obviously on your mind. What is it about this whole thing, sci-fi becoming real, that grabs you?
What is it that makes you want to dive into this world where yesterday's wildest dreams become today's reality? Because it's more than just gadgets, right? It's about the power of imagination, how it shapes the world around us.
It's about realizing that the future isn't like set in stone. We're building it right now with every new invention, every choice we make, even the stories we tell. And sci-fi gives us this amazing way to explore those possible futures. Think about the ethics, the unintended consequences before they become our present.
It's like a dress rehearsal for the future, figuring out the what-ifs. And as we've seen, the line between sci-fi and reality is blurry. Things we think are impossible now could be as normal as checking your phone someday.
That's a pretty exciting thought, isn't it? It means there's still so much out there to discover, to invent. It's an invitation to stay curious, to keep asking those what-if questions.
Because who knows, maybe you'll be the one to come up with the next big thing, the thing that changes everything. So yeah, keep reading those sci-fi stories, keep wondering what if, because the future's still being written, and you're a part of it.